What if I told you that the very pain you're trying so hard to escape, the heartbreak that keeps you awake at night, the failures that haunt you, the emptiness you sometimes feel deep inside, could actually be the key to your greatest transformation? Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, believed that pain is not something to fear or avoid. Instead, he taught that suffering is the path through which we awaken to our truest selves. Jung famously said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Those words carry a truth that is both challenging and liberating. They remind us that the struggles we face are not meaningless. They are messages, invitations, and stepping stones toward growth. Think about it. When life is easy, when everything is comfortable, how much do we really change? Comfort lulls us into repeating the same patterns, the same habits, the same illusions. But when life shakes us to the core, through loss, rejection, or despair, we are forced to look inward. Pain cracks the shell of who we think we are and forces us to confront who we truly might become. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole, of integrating both our light and our shadow, of uncovering the hidden strengths buried within us. And here lies the paradox. The things we fear most, suffering, struggle, heartbreak, are often the very forces that push us toward that wholeness. Stories from every culture echo this truth. Heroes in myths must endure trials before they find their treasure. Just like them, we cannot find our inner gold without first facing the darkness. Jung understood that pain is not the end of the road, it is the beginning of transformation. So if you are struggling right now, if you feel broken or lost, know this. Your pain is not a dead end. It is the teacher guiding you toward growth, wisdom, and strength you never thought you had. In this video, we'll explore Carl Jung's profound insight into why pain leads to growth. We'll uncover how suffering awakens us, how it reveals hidden parts of the self, and how, by facing our struggles, we can transform them into power. Because in Jung's words, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Imagine a young man who has everything mapped out, a promising career, supportive family, dreams within reach. Life feels secure, predictable, almost too comfortable. But then suddenly, life shifts. He loses his job, his partner leaves, and his confidence shatters overnight. In that moment, the world that once felt safe now feels unbearable. He is consumed by pain, wondering, why me? Why now? This is the point where Carl Jung's wisdom becomes startlingly clear. Jung believed that pain, as devastating as it feels, is not meaningless. In fact, he saw it as essential to our growth. The paradox is that the very thing we try hardest to avoid, suffering, becomes the most powerful catalyst for transformation. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." What he meant is that comfort rarely pushes us to examine our lives. Comfort allows us to sleepwalk through existence, repeating patterns, avoiding uncomfortable truths. Pain, on the other hand, tears through the illusions we build around ourselves. It forces us to confront what lies beneath. Think about your own life. Have you ever noticed how the most painful moments also became turning points? The heartbreak that pushed you to discover your independence, the failure that humbled you, but also redirected you toward something more meaningful, the loneliness that made you dig deeper and realize who you truly are. Pain, in Jung's view, is not just an obstacle. It is a doorway. Why is it paradoxical? Because our natural instinct is to run from pain. We numb it with distractions, endless scrolling, overwork, shallow pleasures. But the more we run, the louder the pain becomes. It festers like an ignored wound. Jung compared this to a voice from the unconscious, an inner call that won't let us rest until we listen. When we finally turn toward our suffering instead of away from it, we begin to hear what it has to teach us. Take, for example, the myth of the hero's journey, a story Jung often referenced. The hero does not grow in the comfort of his village. He grows when he steps into the wilderness, faces the dragon, and endures the trial. The pain of the journey is the very thing that transforms him. Without the ordeal, there is no wisdom. Without the wound, there is no awakening. Jung applied this same myth to our daily lives. Every struggle we encounter is, in some sense, our personal hero's journey. The illness that forces us to reevaluate how we live. The rejection that challenges us to strengthen our sense of self. The grief that makes us realize the depth of love. In pain, we find meaning. In suffering, we find depth. But here's the paradox once again. While pain can lead to growth, it does not do so automatically. It requires courage. If we fight against it, if we deny or suppress it, we remain stuck. We repeat the same patterns, circling in misery. But if we turn toward it, if we ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? Then the transformation begins. Jung often warned that unacknowledged pain doesn't disappear. It hides in the unconscious, shaping our thoughts, our behaviors, and even our relationships. But when we bring it into awareness, when we dare to face it, it becomes energy for growth. Pain that was once destructive becomes creative. It can fuel art, wisdom, compassion, and resilience. Think again of that young man who lost everything. At first, he fought his pain, blaming others, numbing himself, sinking into despair. But slowly, he began to see that his suffering was pointing to something deeper. He realized he had built his life on other people's expectations, not his own dreams. The collapse of his old life was painful, yes, but it gave him the chance to build a new one, this time rooted in authenticity. His pain became his teacher. That is the paradox Jung invites us to embrace, that in pain lies possibility, and in suffering lies the seed of transformation. Pain is both wound and medicine, curse and blessing. It is not what destroys us, but what awakens us. And so Jung challenges us. The next time life breaks us open, instead of asking, why me, ask, what is this trying to show me? Because hidden inside that very wound might be the beginning of your greatest growth. Carl Jung introduced one of his most powerful and sometimes frightening ideas, the shadow. He described it as the hidden part of ourselves, the traits, desires, and impulses that we deny, suppress, or reject because they don't fit with the image we want to present to the world. We like to think of ourselves as kind, disciplined, and rational. But what about the anger, envy, fear, and vulnerability we try to bury? That is our shadow. The paradox, Jung said, is that the more we try to repress the shadow, the more control it actually gains over us. And when does it emerge most vividly? In times of struggle, when life cracks our defenses and forces us to meet the parts of ourselves we've long ignored. Imagine a woman who has always been seen as the strong one. Her friends come to her for advice. Her family relies on her in times of crisis. She prides herself on being composed, capable, and unshakable. But when she experiences a sudden divorce, her world unravels. She feels anger, bitterness, and fear she never knew existed. At first, she resists it, telling herself, I can't be this weak. I'm stronger than this. But the more she fights it, the heavier her burden grows. This is where Jung's wisdom enters. The pain she experiences is not a sign of failure. It is the awakening of her shadow. The struggle has pulled up emotions she buried long ago, parts of herself she never wanted to face. If she dares to look into this darkness, she will discover not only pain, but also hidden strength. Jung explained that the shadow is not purely negative. Yes, it contains traits we dislike, jealousy, aggression, selfishness, but it also holds powerful energies that we suppress, creativity, courage, passion, even love. Struggle acts like a key, unlocking the door to this inner chamber. When life is easy, the shadow can remain hidden. But when we are in pain, when our old self-image collapses, the shadow steps forward. It demands to be seen. Think about the times you've been pushed to your limits. Perhaps in heartbreak, you discovered a depth of passion you didn't know you had. In failure, you found resilience you never imagined. In anger, you uncovered the courage to set boundaries. These moments often feel uncomfortable because they challenge the polished version of ourselves we like to believe in. But they are also the moments when the shadow awakens, offering us raw energy to grow. Jung compared this process to alchemy, the ancient art of turning lead into gold. Pain and struggle are like the lead, heavy and difficult to bear. The shadow, once faced, becomes the material we transform into wisdom, strength, and wholeness. But we cannot achieve this transformation if we refuse to look into the darkness. Consider another story. A man who always avoided conflict. He was polite, agreeable, never raised his voice. He thought this made him good, but secretly he felt resentful, taken for granted, even invisible. Then one day at work, after years of silence, he exploded at his boss. At first, he was ashamed of this outburst, but upon reflection, he realized his shadow had spoken. Beneath his anger was a truth. He had been denying his need for respect and recognition. By facing his shadow, he finally learned to assert himself. not destructively, but with confidence. This is the lesson Jung wanted us to learn. Our shadow is not our enemy. It is a mirror showing us what we need to heal, what we need to reclaim. Struggle is the moment when this mirror is placed directly before us, and though it can be uncomfortable, even terrifying, it is also the path to becoming whole. The danger, Jung warned, is when we ignore the shadow. Unacknowledged, it seeps into our lives unconsciously. It shapes our relationships, fuels our addictions, and sabotages our goals. We might project it onto others, blaming them for the very flaws we refuse to see in ourselves. But when we recognize it, when we bring it into awareness, it stops controlling us and instead becomes an ally. So the next time life shakes you, the next time pain stirs up feelings you thought you had buried, remember this: your shadow is awakening. Don't run from it. Don't bury it again. Sit with it. Ask, what is this darkness trying to teach me? Because in its depths lies untapped strength, raw creativity, and the potential for transformation. Jung believed that wholeness is not achieved by being perfect, but by embracing all that we are, both light and dark. And it is often in our struggles, when the shadow rises, that we are offered the greatest chance to embrace this wholeness. If there is one place most of us fear more than anything, it is rock bottom. That moment when everything collapses, our plans, our relationships, our health, or even our sense of identity. Rock bottom feels like failure, like the end of the road. Yet Carl Jung would tell us that it is precisely here, in the ashes of collapse, that a hidden gift waits to be discovered. Jung once wrote, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life." Rock bottom is one of those paradoxes. It feels like destruction, yet it can be the birth of something entirely new. Imagine a man who loses his job after 20 years of loyal service. His career had been his identity, his source of pride, his reason to wake up every morning. Suddenly, he feels worthless, stripped of purpose. At first, he spirals into despair. Friends try to encourage him, but nothing seems to work. Weeks later, sitting alone one night, he has a thought. If the life I built has fallen apart, maybe I was never truly living my own life in the first place. That thought is small, but it is also revolutionary. The collapse that seemed like an ending becomes the first crack through which light can enter. He begins to ask questions he never dared to ask before. Who am I without my job? What do I actually love? What am I here to do? Rock bottom stripped him bare, but in that nakedness, he found the courage to seek his authentic self. This is the gift of rock bottom. It removes the masks we wear, the illusions we cling to, and the false securities that keep us comfortable but unfulfilled. When everything is taken away, we are left with the raw truth of who we are. Jung believed this is where individuation begins, when the old self-image dies and a more authentic self can be born. Think of the caterpillar. To become a butterfly, it must dissolve completely inside the chrysalis. From the outside, it looks like destruction, even death. But within that chaos, a new form is being created. Rock bottom is our chrysalis. It feels like dissolution, but it is transformation in disguise. Many spiritual traditions echo this idea. In myth and story, heroes often lose everything before they find their treasure. The phoenix must burn before it can rise from the ashes. In Jung's psychology, rock bottom is not a punishment. It is an initiation. It forces us to shed what no longer serves us, even if we cling to it desperately. Of course, when you are in the middle of it, this truth is hard to see. Rock bottom feels hopeless, lonely, unbearable. Jung understood this. He went through his own rock bottom after his break with Freud. For years, he was consumed by inner visions, dreams, and psychological turmoil. Yet it was in this dark night of the soul that Jung discovered the foundation of his life's work: the archetypes, the collective unconscious, and the process of individuation. His pain became the soil from which his genius grew. So why does rock bottom hold such power? Because it forces us to surrender control. When we can no longer pretend, when our masks fall away, we are finally free to face the deeper parts of ourselves. Rock bottom pushes us to stop running, to stop distracting, and to listen. It is painful, yes, but it is also the birthplace of radical honesty and, ultimately, transformation. The real danger is not rock bottom itself, but resisting its lesson. Some people numb themselves with addictions, distractions, or denial, trying to avoid the pain. But those who dare to sit with it, who dare to feel the despair fully, often emerge with clarity, resilience, and wisdom they never imagined possible. So, if you ever find yourself at rock bottom, remember this: it is not the end. It is the threshold. It is the place where the false self dies so that the true self can be born. It is the moment when, as Jung said, in all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order. Rock bottom hurts, but hidden in its depths is the gift of rebirth, the chance to rise, not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be. When we hear the word suffering, we often ridicule. It conjures images of heartbreak, illness, failure, and loss, things we would rather never face. Yet Carl Jung believed that suffering, while painful, is also one of the greatest teachers life offers. He argued that it is not through comfort, but through our wounds that we are transformed. To understand this, imagine a blacksmith forging a sword. The raw metal is useless in its original form. It must be placed into the fire, hammered, bent, and shaped over and over again. The process looks violent, even destructive, but only through fire and pressure does the sword become strong, sharp, and purposeful. Jung saw suffering in the same way, the fire that tempers the human soul. He once said, "Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health." At first, this statement seems harsh. Why would anyone need suffering? But what Jung meant is that difficulties prevent us from stagnating. They shake us awake, challenge our illusions, and force us to grow into parts of ourselves we might otherwise never discover. Think of a woman whose life is suddenly disrupted by illness. Her body, once strong, and reliable, now feels like a prison. At first, she is filled with despair, but as time passes, something changes. She learns patience. She becomes more compassionate toward others who suffer. She begins to appreciate the small joys in life: a smile, a sunrise, a conversation. Her suffering reshapes her, deepening her capacity for empathy and gratitude. Though she would never have chosen the illness, she emerges transformed by it. This transformation is not automatic. Suffering can also harden us, make us bitter or cynical if we resist its lessons. Jung warned that suffering must be faced consciously. If we run from it, it festers in the unconscious, creating depression, anger, or destructive behaviors. But if we face it, if we ask, "What is this pain showing me?" then suffering becomes a doorway to growth. Jung's own life illustrates this truth. After his break with Freud, he entered a period of profound suffering, what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He was plagued by visions, dreams, and inner turmoil that made him question his sanity. Yet it was precisely in this dark night of the soul that Jung gave birth to his greatest contributions to psychology: the concepts of archetypes, the collective unconscious, and individuation. His suffering did not destroy him. It transformed him into the thinker who would influence generations. Suffering, then, is not meaningless. It is meaningful if we dare to listen. Every loss, every heartbreak, every failure carries within it a seed of growth. The challenge is that we often don't see it until much later. In the moment, suffering feels unbearable, but when we look back, we realize that those very experiences shaped us into who we are. Consider the countless stories of individuals who turn their pain into purpose. The addict who, after years of struggle, creates a program to help others. The grieving parent who channels their sorrow into a foundation that saves lives. The survivor who uses their scars to inspire others never to give up. These are not exceptions. They are examples of Jung's insight that transformation is born through suffering. In mythology, too, this truth is universal. Heroes are always tested through trials, ordeals, and suffering before they emerge wiser and stronger. Without the descent into darkness, there is no ascent into light. Jung believed that myths mirror the human psyche, and that our own lives follow the same pattern. So the question is not whether we will suffer, because suffering is inevitable. The question is, what will we do with our suffering? Will we allow it to crush us, or will we let it shape us into something greater? Transformation through suffering is not about glorifying pain. It is about recognizing its power to strip away illusions and awaken us to our deepest truths. When we surrender to the process, suffering ceases to be a meaningless burden and becomes the catalyst for rebirth. As Jung beautifully put it, The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and often it is suffering that forces us into that acceptance, raw, vulnerable, and ultimately whole. So, the next time you find yourself in the fire of life, remember the blacksmith's sword. You are not being destroyed. You are being forged. You are being shaped into the person you were always meant to become. Have you ever noticed how certain puns, struggles, or emotional reactions seem to come out of nowhere, catching you off guard, yet feeling oddly familiar? Carl Jung believed that these experiences are not random. They are messages from the unconscious mind. The unconscious, according to Jung, is a vast reservoir of thoughts, memories, and feelings that we are not fully aware of. And when we are in pain, it often speaks to us most clearly. Imagine a young woman who repeatedly finds herself in toxic relationships. Each breakup leaves her devastated, but the pattern continues. She wonders, why do I keep choosing the same kind of partner? At first, she blames herself, or worse, she blames others. Yet Jung would say that her suffering is her unconscious trying to communicate. It holds unresolved feelings, hidden fears, and unmet needs from her past. The pain is not a punishment, it is a guide, pointing her towards self-awareness and growth. Jung observed that pain often manifests as a signal. Anxiety, depression, anger, or emptiness are not just obstacles. They are the unconscious mind's way of urging us to pay attention. These feelings arise when we are out of balance, when aspects of ourselves are ignored or repressed. Pain is the messenger, and the content of the suffering holds a key to understanding what we need to address within ourselves. Think of it like a map. When life is smooth, we wander without direction, relying on habits and distractions. But when pain strikes, the map is revealed. The discomfort pulls us out of autopilot and forces reflection. It asks, what am I avoiding? What part of myself needs to be acknowledged? Jung believed that by listening to these messages, we gain insight not only into our behaviors, but also into the hidden dimensions of our psyche. Consider the case of someone facing a career crisis. They feel restless, unfulfilled, and trapped. The unconscious communicates this dissatisfaction as discomfort, perhaps through insomnia, irritability, or physical tension. Jung would interpret these signals as an invitation to explore one's deeper desires, values, and potential. The pain becomes a teacher, pointing toward a path that may have been ignored for years. Jung also emphasized that unconscious messages often appear symbolically, in dreams, visions, or sudden intuitive insights. A recurring dream of being lost in a dark forest might reflect a person's fear of failure or unacknowledged desires. When we pay attention to these symbols, the unconscious begins to guide us, nudging us toward self-understanding and eventual integration. Pain, then, is not simply suffering. It is a language, one that the conscious mind must learn to interpret. The beauty of this idea is that suffering has purpose. Jung once remarked that when we resist pain, it intensifies. When we face it consciously, it transforms. This is because the unconscious contains both the shadow and the potential for growth. Pain is the bridge that connects our conscious awareness with these hidden aspects of ourselves. Imagine a man haunted by childhood abandonment. As an adult, he experiences intense loneliness in his relationships. Instead of numbing this pain with distractions, he turns inward. He examines the feelings, memories, and fears that arise. Gradually, he begins to understand the patterns he unconsciously repeats. What once seemed like pure suffering now becomes clarity, a guide to healing and transformation. Jung's insight reminds us that pain is never meaningless. It is a form of communication from the deepest layers of the psyche, urging us to examine, reflect, and grow. Every ache, disappointment, or heartbreak is an opportunity to listen to the parts of ourselves that we may have ignored, suppressed, or misunderstood. The key, Jung teaches, is not to escape the pain, but to engage with it. By asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" we unlock the transformative potential hidden within our struggles. Pain becomes a doorway to self-awareness, a compass pointing toward growth, and a teacher guiding us toward the wholeness Jung called individuation. And so, when life confronts you with suffering, remember, the unconscious is speaking. It is pointing the way. It is inviting you to learn, to heal, and to evolve. The pain is not your enemy. It is your mentor, and the messages it carries may shape the most meaningful chapters of your life. Few areas of life expose our vulnerabilities more than relationships. Whether with family, friends, or romantic partners, relationships have a unique way of triggering both our deepest joy and our deepest pain. Carl Jung understood this. He saw relationships not just as interactions between two people, but as mirrors reflecting our inner world, especially the parts we often try to hide. Imagine a woman who constantly attracts partners who are emotionally distant. Each new relationship begins with hope, yet ends in disappointment. She starts to believe that love is fleeting, that connection is impossible. On the surface, it seems like the pain belongs to the other person, but Jung would suggest a deeper truth. This pain is reflecting something within her own psyche. It may be an unresolved fear of abandonment, a lack of self-love, or unacknowledged needs that she has yet to confront. Jung taught that relationships act as catalysts for growth. The conflicts, heartbreaks, and misunderstandings we experience are rarely random. They are unconscious invitations to examine ourselves. They force us to confront the aspects of our shadow, to recognize patterns, and to address the unhealed wounds we carry. Pain in relationships is not punishment. It is a message. It asks, what part of you is still hidden? What part of yourself are you projecting onto others? Consider a couple constantly clashing over trivial matters. Jung would observe that the arguments are often symbolic. They reflect unresolved internal tensions. One partner may be projecting their fears of inadequacy, while the other reflects their need for control or validation. Pain arises naturally from these dynamics, but if approached consciously, it can lead to profound personal insight. Each conflict becomes a mirror, revealing truths about our unconscious desires, fears, and patterns. Jung emphasized that relationships also reveal the interplay of our anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies within each of us. The qualities we are drawn to in others often reflect aspects of ourselves we need to integrate. A person attracted to nurturing partners may be learning to embrace the nurturing side within themselves. A person drawn to strong, assertive partners may be called to develop their own inner strength. Pain surfaces when these qualities are unbalanced, when projection creates tension rather than harmony. The heartbreaks and betrayals we endure, painful as they are, carry lessons that cannot be learned alone. Jung believed that we grow by facing these relational challenges. Emotional pain forces introspection, asking us to look at our fears, insecurities, and unresolved childhood wounds. Through this confrontation, we develop empathy, compassion, and emotional resilience. Pain in relationships is the crucible in which character and self-awareness are forged. Take the story of a man whose partner leaves after years of codependence. Initially, he is consumed by anger, guilt, and despair. Yet over time, he begins to reflect on his own role in the pattern, his need to control, his fear of vulnerability, his inability to express love authentically. Through this painful process, he gains insight into himself and emerges ready to form healthier, more conscious relationships. The pain, though excruciating, becomes a teacher. Jung's wisdom reminds us that relationships are never merely external. They are deeply entwined with the unconscious, and the challenges we face within them are invitations to grow. Emotional pain, heartbreak, and conflict are signals, urging us to integrate our shadow, embrace our anima and animus, and awaken to a fuller, more conscious self. So, when a relationship hurts, remember this: the pain is not wasted. It is a guide pointing you towards self-discovery and transformation. Through the fire of relational suffering, Jung assures us we are offered a rare chance to awaken to the truth of who we are, and to become the person capable of love in its most authentic, whole form. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate goal of human life is individuation, the process of becoming the most complete version of oneself. Individuation is not about perfection, wealth, or external achievements. It is about integrating all parts of the psyche, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the masculine and feminine aspects within us. And according to Jung, pain is one of the most powerful forces that propels us along this path. Imagine a young man who has always prided himself on being logical, controlled, and responsible. He avoids emotions, seeing them as weaknesses, and works tirelessly to maintain the image of the perfect adult. Then one day, life confronts him with a profound loss, the sudden death of a close friend. The grief is overwhelming, shaking him to his core. For the first time, he is forced to feel emotions he has long suppressed. Jung would say that this pain is the unconscious calling, the loss shatters his carefully constructed persona, revealing the shadow aspects of himself he has ignored: fear, vulnerability, and a longing for connection. Individuation begins when he engages with these inner truths, instead of burying them. Pain, in this sense, is not the enemy, it is the guide that draws him inward, toward self-awareness. The process of individuation is deeply paradoxical. We often try to avoid discomfort, but it is discomfort that leads to growth. Jung described life as a series of tensions between opposites: conscious and unconscious, rational and emotional, masculine and feminine. Pain emerges when these opposites are out of balance. By confronting suffering directly, we reconcile these tensions, bringing them into harmony and moving closer to wholeness. Consider another example: a woman struggling with anger and resentment toward her parents. For years, she has blamed them for her challenges, avoiding the pain of looking inward. But through therapy, introspection, or even reflective journaling, she begins to notice how her own fears and insecurities contribute to her suffering. By acknowledging these aspects of herself, the shadow, the unresolved emotions, and the unconscious projections, she begins to integrate them. The anger transforms from destructive energy into insight and strength. This is individuation in action, pain catalyzing self-discovery and growth. Jung also emphasized the role of dreams, symbols, and the unconscious in this process. Dreams often present imagery that highlights the conflicts within the psyche. A recurring dream of being trapped, chased, or lost may symbolize unresolved fears or suppressed desires. Pain, whether in waking life or in dreams, serves as a signal from the unconscious, nudging us to explore these hidden layers. By engaging with the messages embedded in our suffering, we move closer to understanding ourselves fully. Individuation is not linear. It is a journey marked by cycles of struggle and insight. Each painful experience offers a lesson, each heartbreak or failure a mirror reflecting the parts of us we have yet to integrate. Jung believed that those who embrace pain consciously can transform suffering into wisdom, resilience, and authentic power. The journey is demanding, but it is also deeply rewarding. The key lesson here is that pain is not merely something to endure. It is an active participant in our psychological growth. It draws our attention to the unconscious, challenges our habitual ways of thinking and behaving, and opens the door to self-realization. Individuation, in Jung's eyes, is the ultimate gift that emerges from confronting and integrating pain. So, the next time life overwhelms you, remember, the suffering you feel is part of the path to becoming whole. Every wound, every heartbreak, every challenge carries the seeds of individuation. Pain is not your enemy. It is the compass that guides you toward your true self, illuminating the path to wholeness, authenticity, and deep inner freedom. Carl Jung often observed that some of humanity's most profound art, music, and literature springs not from comfort, but from suffering. Pain, he argued, is a powerful catalyst for creativity because it forces us to explore the depths of the unconscious. When life shakes us to or core, we are compelled to give expression to emotions, thoughts, and images that cannot be contained by ordinary words or actions. Imagine a painter who has experienced devastating loss. In the immediate aftermath, she struggles with grief that feels too heavy to bear. Yet in the solitude of her studio, she begins to translate that pain onto canvas, brushstrokes that are raw, chaotic, yet deeply compelling. The colors, the forms, the intensity of the painting reveal aspects of her inner life she may not have consciously recognized. Through suffering, the unconscious speaks, and art becomes its voice. Jung believed that creative expression serves as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. When we endure suffering, our usual ways of coping or rationalizing are insufficient. The psyche seeks outlets, symbols, metaphors, and creative acts to make sense of what is otherwise overwhelming. Pain, in this sense, is both a muse and a teacher, urging us to transform inner chaos into tangible forms of understanding and meaning. Consider the great composers of history, many of whom faced personal tragedy or emotional turmoil. Beethoven continued to create symphonies even as he became deaf. Schubert wrote music infused with melancholy and longing. Jung saw such works not as products of talent alone, but as the psyche's way of processing suffering, integrating the unconscious, and transforming pain into something enduring and universal. The connection between suffering and creativity is not limited to individual expression. It also permeates culture. Myths, legends, and religious stories often arise from collective struggles, portraying trials, losses, and conflicts that shape communal understanding. Jung referred to these stories as archetypal expressions of the unconscious, carrying universal patterns of human suffering and resilience. Pain becomes a source of wisdom, not only for the individual, but for society, inspiring art, ritual, and cultural growth. Even in literature, we see this pattern. Writers who endure heartbreak, war, or exile often produce works of extraordinary depth. Dostoevsky, for example, spent years in Siberian exile and endured intense personal suffering, yet his novels probe the deepest psychological truths about guilt, redemption, and the human spirit. Jung would argue that the suffering these writers experienced activated archetypal energies within their unconscious, which they then projected into creative works that continue to resonate across generations. Pain also fosters innovation. When conventional methods fail, when life refuses to conform to our expectations, the psyche seeks new pathways. Jung likened this process to alchemy, the transformation of lead into gold. Suffering, in its raw and chaotic state, is the lead. Creativity, insight, and expression are the gold. The more fully we engage with our suffering, the more potent the creative transformation becomes. Importantly, Jung emphasized that creativity born from suffering is not limited to artistic professions. Any act of creation, writing, problem solving, teaching, building, or mentoring can channel the transformative energy of pain. When we confront our struggles consciously, we can turn our experiences into something meaningful that contributes to our own growth and the lives of others. Pain, Jung teaches, is not merely an obstacle to avoid. It is a doorway to our deepest self, a spark that ignites imagination, and a force that shapes culture, art, and human understanding. The anguish we feel, if embraced, can become a profound source of insight, beauty, and innovation, connecting the inner world with the outer world in ways that endure beyond ourselves. So the next time life confronts you with suffering, consider this. The pain you feel may be the source of your greatest creative breakthroughs. In your darkest moments, the unconscious speaks, guiding you to transform sorrow into beauty, chaos into meaning, and personal struggle into universal expression. Carl Jung often said that the journey toward wholeness is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage, a willingness to face the darkness within ourselves, the aspects we deny, reject, or fear. This darkness, Jung explained, is where our pain resides, where our shadow lingers, and where the unconscious communicates truths we may not want to hear. Yet, it is precisely in this confrontation that growth occurs. Imagine a man who has spent decades building a life of control and predictability. He prides himself on his success, yet beneath the surface he carries a deep sense of emptiness, insecurity, and unresolved anger from his childhood. Life offers him a stark mirror. A relationship falls apart, his career hits an unexpected setback, and he is forced to confront feelings he has long avoided. In this moment, the darkness within him awakens. Jung would say that the moment of awakening is both terrifying and necessary. Pain often forces us to acknowledge what we have been suppressing, emotions, desires, or fears that we have ignored. This is the first step in the process, Jung called individuation, confronting the unconscious with honesty and courage. Without facing this darkness, we remain fragmented, projecting our shadow onto others and repeating self-destructive patterns. The courage Jung speaks of is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to enter the unknown despite fear. It is sitting with discomfort, exploring the roots of our suffering, and daring to ask the hard questions. Who am I beneath the masks I wear? What truths have I been avoiding? Pain, then, is not simply something to endure. It is the catalyst that summons courage. Consider a woman who has always avoided conflict. She fears anger, criticism, and rejection, so she suppresses her true feelings. But a series of life events, job loss, betrayal, personal setbacks, forces her to confront her emotions head-on. The process is painful. She experiences rage, sadness, and vulnerability in ways she has never allowed herself. Yet by facing this darkness, she begins to reclaim her voice, assert boundaries, and connect authentically with others. Her courage transforms suffering into strength. Jung emphasized that this confrontation with the shadow and the unconscious is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong journey. Darkness will emerge repeatedly, in new forms and contexts. The key is to respond with awareness rather than avoidance, to view each challenge as an opportunity to integrate previously hidden aspects of ourselves. In doing so, we move closer to wholeness, authenticity, and resilience. History and mythology reflect this principle. Every hero's journey involves a descent into darkness, a confrontation with monsters, trials, and chaos. Without this confrontation, there is no transformation, no emergence into light. Jung saw these stories not just as entertainment, but as archetypal templates for the human psyche, illustrating the essential role of courage in the face of inner suffering. Even ordinary life provides examples. Parents confronting grief, individuals battling addiction, or anyone facing major life transitions must muster the courage to sit with discomfort. Pain reveals the unconscious, and courage allows us to integrate its lessons. Without courage, pain remains raw and chaotic, controlling our thoughts, decisions, and relationships. With courage, it becomes transformative, leading us to wisdom and self-realization. Jung's message is clear. To awaken, to grow, to become whole, we must face the darkness willingly. Pain is inevitable. The courage to confront it is a choice. By embracing both the shadow and the unconscious, by listening to the messages embedded in our suffering, we transform our wounds into guides, our fears into insight, and our struggles into wisdom. The courage to face the darkness is the final threshold in the journey Jung describes. It is terrifying, yes, but also liberating. It is the step that turns suffering into meaning, pain into growth, and chaos into a pathway toward individuation. And so, when life plunges you into your darkest moments, remember, it is precisely here, in the shadows, that your greatest strength and insight are waiting. Facing the darkness is not just bravery, it is the doorway to awakening. As we reach the end of our exploration into Carl Jung's profound insights on pain and growth, one truth emerges clearly. Suffering is not merely an obstacle to be endured, but a teacher guiding us toward wholeness. From the paradox of pain to the awakening of the shadow, from rock bottom to individuation, Jung's teachings illuminate a pathway that transforms struggle into self-discovery. Pain, in Jungian terms, is never meaningless. It is a message from the unconscious, a reflection of the parts of ourselves we may have suppressed or denied. Whether it manifests as heartbreak, loss, failure, or fear, it serves a purpose: to awaken us, to reveal the hidden dynamics of our psyche, and to challenge us to confront ourselves fully. As Jung reminds us, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. Pain is the mirror that allows us to look inside. Throughout this journey, we have seen that the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, emerges in moments of struggle. This shadow, though uncomfortable and even frightening, carries immense potential for growth. By facing it with courage, we reclaim energies and qualities that were previously hidden: creativity, resilience, insight, and authenticity. Jung teaches that integrating the shadow is essential for true individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole and complete. Rock bottom, as we explored, is not a dead end but a doorway. It strips away illusions, exposes what is essential, and forces us to confront ourselves honestly. Jung compared this process to alchemy. Suffering is the lead, and through conscious engagement, we transmute it into gold, wisdom, strength, and self-realization. Those who have faced the depths of despair often emerge stronger, more compassionate, and more attuned to their inner guidance. Creativity, too, blossoms from pain. Across history, literature, art, and music, human suffering has fueled some of the greatest works ever created. Pain forces us to seek expression beyond words, giving form to the unconscious and connecting our inner experiences with the world around us. Jung's psychology shows that suffering, far from being a mere burden, is a source of inspiration, innovation, and cultural enrichment. Jung also teaches that relationships magnify the lessons of pain. Interpersonal challenges serve as mirrors, reflecting our unresolved fears, unintegrated shadows, and unmet needs. Heartbreak, conflict, and disappointment are not punishments. They are invitations to explore, heal, and grow. Pain in relationships becomes a catalyst for emotional maturity and the development of authentic, conscious connections. Above all, Jung emphasizes the role of courage, facing pain, confronting the shadow, integrating the unconscious. These tasks are daunting. They require bravery, persistence, and self-reflection. But the reward is profound, a life lived with authenticity, insight, and wholeness. Pain becomes not a foe, but a guide, leading us toward transformation, growth, and fulfillment. So what can we take away from Jung's teachings? First, embrace your suffering instead of resisting it. Look within when you are challenged. Ask what your pain is trying to teach you. Second, confront your shadow, the fears, desires, and traits you have long denied. These are not signs of weakness, but keys to your growth. Third, recognize the creative and transformative potential of struggle. Use your challenges as fuel to express yourself, connect with others, and contribute meaningfully to the world. Finally, take action. Start a journal, reflect on your patterns, observe your reactions to challenges, or explore your dreams. Seek guidance from therapy, meditation, or introspective practices. Jung reminds us that the path to growth is active. We must engage with our pain, not ignore it. Each step we take toward understanding ourselves brings us closer to individuation, authenticity, and fulfillment. In the end, Carl Jung's wisdom gives us a map for navigating the difficult, unpredictable terrain of life. Pain is inevitable, but growth is optional. By confronting suffering consciously, embracing our shadows, and integrating our experiences, we can transform adversity into insight, chaos into clarity, and despair into strength. Remember, the journey may be challenging, but it is also a profound opportunity. Your struggles are not obstacles, they are invitations. Your pain is not meaningless, it is a doorway. And the courage to face it is the key to awakening the fullest, most authentic version of yourself.